combination between a dumbbell fly and a dumbbell press. When we're performing muscle building exercises, we're primarily trying to search for two sensations, a stretch sensation and a squeezing sensation. Both of those feelings will typically come towards the end range of motion. So here, for example, this is the end range of motion, or towards the end range of motion for my chest musculature and some of the fibers that are into my shoulder tissue. And then as we get towards the top, when I squeeze together, this is towards the end range for my chest tissue and some of my shoulder tissue at the top here too. So that's why this exercise falls into that category quite nicely, because we have a stretch component and a squeeze component within the same movement. So the objective is not to lift maximal load, and the objective isn't to perform a normal fly movement. The problem with dumbbell flies for me is when I'm towards the bottom down here and I have a bit of a stretch sensation on my chest, which, like I just said, is one of the main primary focuses we should be trying to achieve within muscle building exercises to get a stretch. For the amount of stretch that I get towards the bottom of the range of motion, the weight has to be quite light because it's quite far away from the joint that is doing the movement. So I can't really lift hugely heavy weights when I'm doing a fly movement without being at greater risk of injury. But then once you press up with a fly from about this sort of height, the weight that you needed to get a good sensation down here doesn't really do very much up here. And so I find it's beneficial to use in some contexts because it can be quite useful to do flies out in this direction, but then this whole part of the movement is kind of obsolete. So that's why I like to use this exercise, and I do a bit of a merge between the two. So it starts with the dumbbells set up like I'll be doing a normal dumbbell press, and instead of initiating the movement with my shoulder and my elbow like I would do with a dumbbell press, I just initiate the movement with my shoulder and I keep my elbows locked till I get to about this sort of position and I can feel some kind of tension onto my chest musculature. At that point, when I start to feel that tension increase, my goal is then to keep the same amount of tension on the chest musculature as it goes through the range of motion. And I do that by judging how far my knuckle stays to the outside of my elbow joint. The further my knuckle is outside of my elbow, the more rotational force is going to be put onto the chest musculature. And the more my knuckle is stacked over my elbow, it slightly reduces the rotational force. If I was to do a dumbbell press with this weight, it wouldn't feel anywhere near as difficult as if I just have my knuckle slightly outside my elbow, and you'll see all the way down towards the bottom here, the knuckle and the load is still on a slightly open elbow joint, and as a result of that, it just causes a little bit more rotational force around the chest musculature. You do have to be careful because the further out I go with my elbow, the more pressure I'm going to be putting onto my bicep. And if I was to do this with heavier loads, it can feel more like a bicep strain than a chest exercise, and the objective of this is to make it a chest exercise. And so that's why I've liked performing the exercise like this. That's why I like to coach the exercise like this, because it's a great example of getting load through the tissue, getting a stretch sensation, and then as you come up towards the top, the reverse is the same. The knuckle stays slightly outside the elbow. I'm thinking about pulling the bicep across to the chest. I'm not thinking about the dumbbells much. And when you reach the top here, you lock the elbows with the dumbbells still out away from the outside of the shoulder, so that the final movement is your chest pulling the dumbbells together, not using your triceps at the top to finish the movement off. And then at the top here, if you keep your shoulder blades retracted, you can squeeze your chest together and encourage this squeeze sensation at the top. And then if you keep that squeeze sensation as you then start to lower out again, the chest musculature never really has an opportunity to rest. And that is why I think it's a very good exercise to form.